I lashed out at my girlfriend for crying over Stanley's death when she barely reacted to my dad passing away, but what she told me after made me feel like the real villain in my own grief story. I blew up on her about it when I should have stepped back and taken a breath. I know that. I'm not proud of how I handled things. I reacted emotionally, impulsively, but I was hurt. And maybe I shouldn't be judged for that, because the pain caught me off guard, even though it had been simmering under the surface for a while now. I'm still trying to figure out if the way I feel is justified, or if I'm just dragging my grief into places it doesn't belong. My girlfriend and I have known each other for 4 years, but we've only been together romantically for about a year. The transition from friends to partners was smooth, easy, even. She's funny, smart, supportive in her own way, and she seemed to care deeply about me. Over the holidays last year, we took a trip together, me, her, and my parents, and she stayed in a hotel with us. It was a good trip. Everyone got along. My dad especially liked her. It was one of those rare, perfect times where everything feels okay, even if you know things are changing. And they were. A few months after that trip, my dad passed away. It wasn't sudden. We knew it was coming. He had been sick for a while. But even when death is expected, it punches you in the chest like you never saw it coming. It hollowed me out. My mom and I leaned on each other to get through the thick of it. My girlfriend was there, too. She listened. She sat with me while I cried, held my hand during the funeral, rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. She told me she didn't know what to say, and at the time I told her that was okay. Because grief isn't about words. I thought her being there was enough. Until today. Today, Stanley died. And my girlfriend broke. She absolutely crumbled. I walked into our living room to find her curled up on the couch, sobbing so loudly, I thought something had happened to her family. I rushed over, genuinely panicked. And she looked up at me, red-eyed and shaking, and said, "Stanley died." It hit me like a truck. I just stood there, frozen. She kept talking about how Spider-Man was the first comic book she ever read, how much Stan Lee meant to her growing up, how she couldn't believe someone so kind and influential was gone. She said she was going to miss his cameos in the Marvel movies and that the world felt different now without him in it. I just listened, but with every word, I could feel something welling up inside me. Something ugly and angry. And I hated that I felt that way because it was obvious she was genuinely hurting. I didn't want to take that away from her. But still, I couldn't help it. All I could think about was how different this was from when my dad died. She had met my dad.
Talked to him.
Spent time with him. He knew her name. He knew the name of her dog. He made her laugh over breakfast. And when he died, she sat beside me and said, "I don't know what to say." She said it over and over. Never shared a memory of him. Never cried. Never told me how sad she was that he was gone. I didn't expect her to fall apart over my dad. Not like I did. That would be unreasonable. But seeing her devastated today over someone she never met, someone who, for her, existed entirely on pages and screens, just made something inside me snap. I lost it. I told her how confused and hurt I was, how I couldn't understand why Stan Lee's death made her cry harder than the death of someone she actually knew. I told her I didn't want to compare grief, but I couldn't pretend like this didn't affect me. She looked shocked, like the connection between the two events hadn't even occurred to her. At first, she tried to explain that Stan Lee had been a part of her life since childhood, that he was a symbol of hope and imagination, and that his death felt like the end of an era. She said she didn't mean to be insensitive, that she just didn't know how to handle my dad's death, didn't want to overstep or say something wrong. She kept repeating, "I didn't know him like that." And maybe that's true, but I did. I knew him. He was my dad. And I guess, deep down, I wanted her to mourn with me, not just be there as support, but as someone who understood that he mattered, that his life and death were worth more than awkward silence, and I'm sorry. I regret how I said things tonight. I regret letting it fester this long without ever really unpacking it. I regret not being able to see that just because someone cries harder doesn't mean they cared more. Grief is messy. It's inconsistent. And sometimes we mourn symbols more loudly than we mourn people we knew in real life, especially if we're scared of making someone else's pain worse. Stan Lee is a media legend, no question about it. The man shaped an entire universe. He gave people something to believe in. I get it. I do. But the thing is, she didn't know him. She never met the man. Never shook his hand or heard his laugh in real time. She knew the idea of him, the mythology, the work. But my dad? She met my dad. She sat at a dinner table with him. She smiled at his dumb jokes. He made her pancakes one morning when we all stayed in a hotel together over Christmas break. I still remember her laughing with her mouth full, and him chuckling and saying, "I like this one." And she couldn't spare any tears for him. That's what kept echoing in my head last night while she sobbed on the couch. I stood there, frozen in this strange mix of hurt and guilt and confusion. And yeah, I said it. I said the thing you're not supposed to say. I told her exactly what I was thinking. Loudly. Too loudly. I told her that she didn't cry for my dad. That she barely reacted when I was grieving and struggling to breathe in the weeks after he passed. That it didn't sit right with me that she could shatter over a man she'd never met and barely flinch over the death of someone who once handed her a hot chocolate and asked her how school was going. She looked at me, just stunned. Her face crumpled mid-cry and then went blank. She didn't say anything for a while. And, to be honest, I didn't expect her to. I had crossed a line. Even in the middle of my frustration, I knew it. But it was like the grief I had been bottling up cracked through the surface in the ugliest possible way. I wasn't mad at her, not really. I was mad at the universe for taking my dad. I was mad that I still couldn't talk about him without getting a lump in my throat. And I was mad that I had expected her to grieve him the way I did, as if she possibly could. We didn't talk much after that. We agreed to revisit it in the morning. And all night, I barely slept. I kept replaying it, what I said, how I said it, how she looked, how silent the room was after. It just felt like a bad movie scene playing on repeat in my head. So this morning, I decided to do something about it. I stopped by her place. I picked up her favorite order from McDonald's, shout out to the person online who suggested that, thank you. I parked outside and just sat in the car for a few minutes trying to work up the courage. Then I knocked on her door. She opened it still looking like she hadn't fully slept either, hair up in a loose bun and wearing an old hoodie she'd stolen from me months ago. When she saw the McDonald's bag, she just blinked at me, then let out a sigh like she wasn't sure if she was ready to talk yet, but also kind of appreciated the gesture. We sat down on the couch, and I handed her the food. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to let her speak when she was ready. She ate a few fries in silence and then gave me this tiny, crooked smile and said, "You remembered no pickles." That was the opening I needed. I told her I was sorry. I told her I had no right to explode on her like that. That I got caught up in my own grief and let it twist something innocent into something ugly. I told her that even though I knew she cared about me, it still hurt when I saw her crying like that over someone she didn't know, when she'd been so composed about my dad. She was quiet for a while, then reached for the ketchup packet, tore it open, and squirted it right on my kneecap. I stared at her, stunned, and she said, "That's payback. Emotional ketchup." And I burst out laughing. Like, real laughter. The kind you don't expect to find at the tail end of a serious apology. She started laughing too. It broke the tension like nothing else could have. It was one of those weird, intimate moments you only have with someone who knows exactly when to be serious and when to be ridiculous. After the laughter faded, we actually talked. She told me that when my dad died, she didn't know what to say. Not because she didn't care, but because she was terrified of saying the wrong thing. She said she'd never lost someone close to her before, and that the gravity of my grief made her feel like a small, clumsy outsider. So she focused on just being present and tried not to make the moment about her. She told me she understood that my dad's death was still a fresh wound, something I hadn't fully made peace with yet, and because of that, she understood where the anger was coming from. She said it gently, not in a way that excused how I acted, but in a way that acknowledged that pain can twist your logic without your permission. Still, she made it clear that I was wrong to blow up at her the way I did. And I didn't disagree. I couldn't. She was completely right. She told me that, no matter how much pain I was in, she would have preferred I came to her with calm honesty instead of letting it erupt into something explosive and cruel. Even if what I was feeling wasn't entirely fair, even if it did make sense, it still would have meant more to her to talk through it with me than to be shouted at during a moment when she herself was grieving, too. That made me pause. Grieving too. Not crying too hard over a stranger, but grieving. She was grieving in her own way, and I had dismissed that because it didn't look like mine. After saying all of that, she smiled a little and said, "I forgive you. But I'm asking for a get-out-of-jail-free card for when I inevitably get upset about something I can't help feeling." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit me hard. It reminded me how rare it is to find someone who can both hold you accountable and offer you compassion in the same breath. And I felt a fresh wave of guilt, not the explosive kind, but the heavy, sobering kind, for not recognizing that in the moment when she needed me the most. I apologized again. Not just for what I'd said, but for failing to see her pain. She explained something else to me, too, something I'm still turning over in my mind. She said Stan Lee's death didn't hit her because she'd met the man, but because she'd grown up with him, in a way. With his stories, his worlds, his imagination. His work had been a part of her identity, her comfort, her language of escape, her symbol of hope. It was like losing a guiding voice that had always quietly existed in the background of her life, without ever asking anything of her. She said, I know it sounds weird to cry like that over someone I never knew, but his stories carried me through some of the loneliest parts of growing up. And hearing that, I got it. Maybe not in the exact same way, because I don't have that kind of fandom attachment to anything. But I got it in the sense that some people mourn the loss of ideas, of symbols, of voices that meant safety, or imagination, or freedom to them. She'd lost a creator who helped build the foundation of her joy. That doesn't require a handshake to be real. Then she said something else, something I'll probably never forget. She told me she did mourn my dad. That just because she wasn't sobbing on the floor didn't mean she didn't care. She told me she appreciated him, that she saw how much he loved me, how gently he treated her, and how hard it must have been for me to lose that kind of presence in my life. But she didn't want to cry with me. Not because she was trying to avoid the grief, but because she wanted to be my support system. She said, You needed a rock, so I tried to be one. I wish I remembered the metaphor she made about rocks and rivers, because I remember it being beautiful at the time. Something about how rivers wear down rocks over time, but in that moment, she needed to be the kind of rock that didn't erode, that didn't shift or crumble, that just stayed steady for my sake. I think what she meant was, she held her own grief in silence because she didn't want to add weight to mine. And the truth is, I never even realized it. I mistook her quiet strength for emotional distance. What hurts the most is knowing she was suffering too, and I didn't see it because I was so wrapped up in my own pain. I assumed that because she wasn't visibly breaking, she wasn't hurting. But she was. She just chose to carry it differently. That's something a few of you in the thread helped me understand. Some of the comments hit hard, and honestly, I'm glad they did. Some of you worded things in a way that snapped me out of my tunnel vision. You made me realize that I was policing someone else's grief, judging it against the scale of my own, and acting like mine was the only valid way to mourn. And that's not just unfair, it's dehumanizing. People don't grieve the same way. They can't. I learned that the hard way. And even when someone is there for you, it doesn't mean they aren't grieving right alongside you. Sometimes being the person who doesn't cry is the hardest role to play in a room. I feel lucky, so lucky, to be with someone who has the emotional maturity and patience to talk me through these things. To listen without shutting down. To forgive me, even when I let my grief turn into something that hurt her. And I think, weirdly enough, this whole conversation brought us closer. It exposed some raw nerves, yeah, but it also made us see each other more clearly. I know I'll miss my dad for the rest of my life. That wound doesn't close. It just reshapes itself over time. But now I feel a little more at peace knowing I'm not the only one carrying his memory forward. That even if she didn't grieve him the way I wanted her to, she still felt that loss. She still saw his value. And she still chose to be there for me in the only way she knew how. I think that's love. Not just showing up for the big moments, but being able to sit in the awkward, uncomfortable ones. The moments where you don't know what to say, but you stay anyway. The ones where you screw up and still get handed a McDonald's bag and a chance to make it right. So yeah, I'm still processing everything. We both are. But I'm grateful. For her, for the people who gave me tough love online, and even for the moment that broke us open because it gave us the space to rebuild something stronger. I'm learning. And I hope I keep learning. Because grief doesn't come with a manual, but love, real love, comes with patience. And I couldn't ask for a better person to learn with.